Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Now, throughout the year I don't film book haul videos because I try to keep my book buying at a minimum. But today I thought it would be fun to look through all of the books that I have bought myself this year and see how many of those I have read. Now, it should be around 40 books, maybe even 40 precisely. I haven't really counted them, but I do have a spreadsheet where I have all the books in, but I also have the gifts in there. So it is, a little bit of math to get to the exact number. But as you can see right here, I have a stack of books that I want to talk to you about today. Let you know what I've bought, whether I've read it already, and whether I would recommend it if I have. And with this, my overall goal is to reduce my TBR. So that's something I've been working on for many years, not very successfully, but my goal is to have a 5 to 10 book TBR. Right now, I'm around 50, I believe, so it's not going that well. And when we go through this list, please do keep in mind that I usually only buy books for certain projects that I'm doing or audiobooks, because unfortunately through my library I do not have access to audiobooks, so I do have to buy them. You will see that the vast majority of the books I'm gonna mention will be audiobooks because I don't have a backlog of those. I just buy them when I'm ready to go. And then, yeah, that's basically all of my buying. I try to minimize all of the random purchases here and there to really get down my TBR to where I want it to be. So let's get started. I will go through it chronologically. So we're gonna start with the earliest book I bought and then move on to the last one. And spoiler alert, the last one I haven't even bought yet, but I know I will in a couple of days, so I'll mention that one at the end. So my first project for the new year was to read the Farseer trilogy. I had already read the first book, but I needed to still get the next two, which were Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. I have by now read both of these and would highly recommend. I'm so excited to continue on with this series next year or with the Realm of the Elderlings series. So yeah, definitely recommend those. This is a series that follows Fitz, who is a young boy who gets wrapped up in this world of politics and some kinds of magic, and he's just trying his best, to be honest, in this very complicated fantasy world. Next up, I bought an ebook, and that was Priory of the Orange Tree, again for one of my projects this year. I wanted to get this one as an ebook because it is so big and I was afraid that it wouldn't be very nice, reading it physically with my hands. So the ebook it was. I have read this, I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend if you are a fantasy reader. I think that this is not a great beginning book for fantasy, but I really liked it. So now, talking about big fantasy books that won't be very nice to hold and read, I got the whole Dandelion Dynasty series, and I got these as physical copies, even though they are massive, because I love the covers so much. Let's be real, they're gorgeous. We've got A Craze of Kings, book 1, The Wall of Storms, book 2. I think then we have The Veiled Throne, book 3, and Speaking Bones, book 4, if I'm not mistaken. So I've read all of these. They were great if you want to get into a very epic high fantasy that is kind of Asian or Chinese inspired, but really creates its own world. Then I would so highly recommend this series. I would say read the first book and see how you like it. I absolutely loved the first book, and you can read this as a standalone. But as soon as you step into book 2, you're in for the long haul. So then you have to read all of the books to come to a nice conclusion. It gets really dark, really heavy, so many despicable people, horrible things happening. Definitely look up content warnings for this. It was at times the hardest thing to read, but yeah, great series. Then I said that I try to avoid random purchases, but I did go to one library sale when I was in a different city, and don't mind the cat hair on some of these books. Somehow my cat loves to get hair all over my books. So in that library sale, I got Hollow Kingdom in the German translation by Kira Jane Buxton. I have read this and it was fine, but I will probably not keep it. And then I also got The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which I have not read yet. Now, Hollow Kingdom is a book about the apocalypse from the point of view of a crow, and we're following some other animals as humanity is dying out. And I have no idea what this is. It is historical fiction, has something to do with planes, and I've heard mixed reviews, but I got it for very, very cheap. Now we're going back to some audiobook purchases. I got White Horse by Erica T. Worth. And this one is a thriller that is inspired by Native American mythology. I really like this one. I would definitely recommend if you want to try out a thriller that is written by a Native American author. So I have read this and I really liked it. Then I bought a little novella, A Dead Gen in Cairo by P. Jelly Clark, and that one I also really enjoyed. In this one we have kind of a mystery story, but in a fantastical settings, because we do deal with some jinn and like angel-like creatures. Then we have Bad Cree by Jessica Jones, and this one is also a thriller that is inspired by indigenous Native American mythology. It is quite similar to White Horse, so if you loved that one, you will probably enjoy this one as well, even though I found it to be a tiny little bit weaker, but still do not regret buying it and have read it, obviously. Then I got Sea Change by Gina Chung. This one is a literary fiction about a woman and an octopus, and this one it's just kind of like a coming of age, but like later in life. So kind of the struggles you have in your 20s when you're turning 30, in that kind of direction. Really enjoyed it. I have read it and I would recommend if it sounds interesting to you. Then we have one that is a little bit more controversial, I guess, and that is Siren Queen by Nhi Vo. I really wanted to read that one because I loved the Great Gatsby retelling by the author. This one is a historical fiction with some magic in it that focuses on Hollywood, I think in the 20s, 1920s, something like that. It does have some like magic and some just like weird stuff in it, so it's not for everyone. I don't know if it was for me, but I do not regret reading it. I just wouldn't like widely recommend it, but I have read it. Then we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which I've also read. In this one we are following an author who steals a manuscript from her dead Asian American like author colleague and tries to publish it as her own. This is kind of a thriller, kind of literary fiction. I really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend. Then we're going back to the historical fictions. I got A Million to One by Adiba Jaigirdar. In this one we are following 4 girls who sneak onto the Titanic to do a heist. This one I felt kind of like lukewarm about, so I have read it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it a ton, but you will always get me with Titanic stuff. Then I got another book by an author I've read before and enjoyed. I got Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Bashardust. I loved Girl Serpent Thorn, which I think is by the same author. But this one was just okay. I have read it. I would say if you're like really hardcore into Snow White, give this a try. But yeah, it's a Snow White retelling. I think this was okay. It was okay. Then we have another one of my little projects, because I got the first book of a series, The Bone Shot Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I also got the second and the third book, so that would be The Bone Shot War and The Bone-Shot Emperor, which is the other way around. So the second book is The Emperor, third book is War. I read the whole trilogy. I did enjoy it. I didn't love it. I definitely wanted to love it more, but it was fun. I will never forget the little like animal companion we get in this, Mephi. I love him. He's amazing. Yeah, so would recommend if you're into a fantasy series. Then we're going back to the like kind of end of the world thriller kind of vibe, and we have Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wopgesik Rice. This one is again a book by a indigenous author, and I really like this one. There's now a sequel to it as well, which I want to check out. So I would recommend this one if you're into like post-apocalyptic kind of stories, but like more literary fiction, but then also with some like thriller vibes. Definitely an interesting book, but not one that I like absolutely loved. Moving along to my next project, I got as ebooks the Founders trilogy. So I got Foundryside, Shorefall and Loglands by Robert Jackson Bennett, and again, I've read these and I really enjoyed them. They just gradually got better, which I love when that happens. So the first book was fine, the second book was really good, and then the third book just brought me to tears, made me cry. It was so tense and the stakes were so high. I loved it. So definitely recommend this series if you're into fantasy. It's so good. Next up, I got Chlorine by Jade Song. This is again more of a literary fiction, but with horror elements. In this one, we are following a young girl who is Asian American and she's a swimmer and she turns into a mermaid, whatever that means. And you're following that journey in the book. This is again a book I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I'm not mad that I've read it, but it is like special. It's definitely not for everyone. Then I got a book that I have already read many years ago, but I needed to get a version for myself because back then I read it from the library, so I decided to get the audiobook this time around. And that was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, a classic. So I did a reread of that, still really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite classics. Somehow, yeah, this is my favorite like dystopian classic, which is weird. But yeah, all of the other ones, usually disappointments. This one I really like. This one we are following a, what are they called? Are they called firefighters? I feel like that's wrong. But yeah, basically in this world we have like firefighters, but they're not there to put out fires. They're there to burn books. And that's all about that. And I really like it. Then for another little video project that I did, I got Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. I got this one for a special vlog video that I did, which was really fun. So that was already enough enjoyment, but then this book was also really good. This is the first book in a fantasy series, so now I'm eagerly awaiting the second book next year. And in this one, it's kind of like the Witcher series. I've heard, I have not read the Witcher series, but I've heard that comparison. We're following a young woman who is kind of like this warrior person, and she kills gods, so hence the title. But she meets a little girl who is kind of like bonded to a god, and they're trying to get rid of that bond, basically. Really enjoyed it. This was really fun, and I would recommend if you like fantasy books. Then this year I finally continued with the Temperance Brennan series, and so I would be ready next year to keep reading it. I got the next book that I needed, and that one is Bare Bones by Katie Reichs. I think it's book 6? Yeah, it should be book 6 in this series. I really enjoy it, I really like it, and I'm collecting these covers because I think they're really cute. So I have not read this one, but very firm plans for next year. Then we're going back to The Mermaids because I got American Mermaid by Julia Langbein. In this one we are following a school teacher who wrote a book that became very popular, and now she is tasked with writing kind of the screenplay to make a movie of that book. And she has to team up with 2 guys who are more experienced with writing these screenplays, but they're like the most prosy bros you can find in LA. And we also get kind of parts of her book within the book. I really did not like this one, unfortunately. It was just so boring. It was like probably the most boring book I've read all year, so I definitely would not recommend this one. Just save yourself the trouble. Then we're moving on to the haunted houses, and I got A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, which was one of my most anticipated releases. And this one I've read, I really enjoyed. We're following a girl who goes back home to live for a couple of weeks with her mum, and she realizes that something is very, very odd about the house and her mother. Really enjoyed this one. T. Kingfisher is a safe bank for me. So far I have enjoyed everything I've read by her, and I don't think she will disappoint me. Another one of my anticipated releases was A House of Roots and Ruin. Now this one is a bit difficult. This is kind of the sequel to A House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin E. Craig, and I loved or like really enjoyed The House of Salt and Sorrows. It was so creepy and it had these like ghostly vibes. I just really liked it. This one unfortunately did not work well for me, and this is setting up more probably, and I don't know if I really want to continue with that, if it's going to be like another little duology thing within the bigger series. We'll see. Would not really recommend this one. Then we have Our Last Echoes by Kate Alice Marshall. This is kind of the sequel to Rules for Vanishing, which I've read last year. So this year I've read Our Last Echoes. This is a book about a girl who has lost her mother when she was very, very young. And she's now turned 18 and she decides to go back to an island in Alaska where her mother was last seen, and she's trying to find out what happened. This one is so good. If you like weird horror but make it YA, perfection. Such a great book. Definitely recommend. If you like Rules for Vanishing, definitely continue on with this one. They don't really have a lot to do with each other, but some of the like side characters appear in both of these, and I think there's also more. I'm not quite sure yet. Then we have another little project that I did, and that was reading White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. So I've read this one as well. Really enjoyed it. In this one we are following a family who has always lived in this house, and the women of that family have a very strange connection to this house. This one, look up content warnings if you want to read it. It's very weird, very literary fiction, so don't expect like a traditional witch story. That's not what's in here, but I really enjoyed it and I would recommend if you are into this kind of writing. Then we have All the Murmuring Bones by A.G. Slater. This is the last mermaid book on the list. And this one I really enjoyed. We are following the last heir to a family who were very rich, very wealthy, very influential, because they had a deal with the mer people where they would sacrifice a child of every generation for their support in a way. And this family is now crumbling down, and we're kind of following this last girl who is left of this family. And I had a great time with this one. It's very dark, very eerie, had the perfect autumnal vibes, and would also be great in winter, I believe. Yeah, would definitely recommend. Then we have Foxglove by Adeline Grace. This is the second book to Belladonna, where we follow a girl called Signa who has a little bit of trouble with death. And these books are kind of mysteries where you're trying to find a murderer, but like different, like each book is one mystery basically. So in the second one we do get a new perspective, which was quite interesting, and overall I really enjoyed it. I do like Adeline Grace's kind of storytelling. I think it's always very compelling as audiobooks, so if you're into that I would recommend. Then we have A Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Booley. This is kind of the sequel to Firekeeper's Daughter, but the story is set like a decade later or something like that. And we are following a girl called Perry who doesn't really want to do anything for her summer. She just wants to spend it fishing, but she is forced to do an internship, and through this internship she gets kind of introduced to the whole idea of repatriation, and she kind of gets sucked into all of that. And I really loved this book. I would highly recommend if you're a tiny bit interested in YA thrillers, I think this is one of the best ones out there. Even though it is more literary, this is also kind of a heist story, but I wouldn't expect too much of that because it takes a long time to get to the heist. But I really enjoyed this one. And now lastly, we're getting into the festive books that I've got. The first one was Let Your Hearts Be Light by Faye Quinn. This is a male-male romance that is smutty, which was a new experience for me. I don't read smutty books. I did like this one. I think if you like smutty books, this is probably good. I don't know. Like, what are the standards? I thought that the, like, kind of frame story for the smut was really nice. We're following two dads who are already a little bit older, and their kids sign them up for this, like, holiday buddy program where they have to spend time with the other family, and they get closer and closer. And I thought that was really sweet, but I can't really recommend it because it's not what I usually read. So it feels a bit weird to recommend it because I just don't know anything about this genre. And then we have The 12 Days of Christmas by Poppy Alexander, which I've also read already. And this one is a holiday romance without smut. And we are following a woman who is a professional chef, and she has to go back to her hometown because her mother has cancer and then at the beginning of the book has also passed away, and she's kind of lost in her life, and this is about her finding her way back during the 12 days of Christmas. So this is actually set after Christmas. If you're looking for a festive read for that period, this would be great. It does have some heavy themes though, so I would suggest looking up content warnings, but obviously we have death of a parent and grief and a lot of talk about cancer as well, which is not like festive to everyone. But I think that the book had a good balance, so I would still recommend it if you're interested. And then we have the book I'm currently reading, which is 3 Holidays and a Wedding. This one has 2 authors, Uzma Jalaluddin and Marissa Stapley. This one I'm also really enjoying. I'm not quite halfway through with it, but this one follows a little bit of a chaotic situation where we have a plane emergency landing in this like very small Canadian town where there's also a movie produced. This is set in the year 2000, and we do have 3 holidays because Ramadan, Hanukkah and Christmas are all kind of in the same time frame, and it just gets a bit chaotic with like family members and potential romance. So we'll see, but I'm having fun with that one so far. And then the last book that I have plans on buying for myself this year is The Kingdom of Sweets by Erica Johansson. I loved the Tearling series by Erica Johansson, and I love the Nutcracker story, like the basic concept of it. So I can't wait for this retelling. I've heard that it's really dark, but I'm ready. So I will definitely buy this one in the next few days once I finish my current audiobook. And then I don't have any more firm plans. I will probably get some books for Christmas. I wanna maybe read some of my like library options, but I don't think there will be much more book buying this year. So with that being said, I have spent around 350 euro for books this year, which means that my average spending per month would be around 30 euro, give or take. So I think that's quite alright. Since I have read almost all of these books, I feel like it's not going to waste. But still, I'm trying to reduce the TBR, so I should try to do better with that as well. We'll see, but as I said, most of these were audiobooks, so they don't really count into the whole TBR reduction program. But yeah, let me know how many books have you bought this year. I would love to hear about that. What were your standouts? Do you have any recommendations for what I should be on the lookout for? Yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like or a nice comment. I always appreciate those. And if you subscribe, I'll talk to you soon with more end of the year content. Bye!